Hello loves and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing our Orisha story time, which I feel like is a channel favorite because, we get to come here and just tell stories and have a chat and look at the lessons in the stories, which are really, really important on why these stories are important in the first place. As always, I'm going to be reading from this book. This is the African Narratives of the Orisha Spirits and Other Deities. This is a thick textbook. Okay, it will be linked down below for those who are going to want to get their hands on it for their own personal research or whatnot. So it will be linked down below if you want to get your hands on it. So definitely check that out in the description below. Before we get started though, I would just like to remind everybody that next month's workshop is live. So I'm really excited because it's all about healing the matriarch. So we're going to be focusing on healing specifically trauma that's happened to the matriarchal line of the ancestors. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different forms of trauma. There's going to be a 1 hour long meditation. There's going to be a workbook. We're going to do a lot of things. I'm really excited about it. So definitely make sure that you get your tickets. It will be linked down below. If you are a Patreon member, High Priest levels, as always, you already have your ticket. But it doesn't include the workbook. So you guys will get that once the workbook launches as well. But I'm really excited for that. It's going to be a multi-part workshop because we're going to do a healing the patriarch as well, which is going to focus on the male ancestors specifically within the patriarchal line, ancestrally, and issues that have occurred in that aspect, and that's going to be a whole thing. But yeah, definitely make sure you check it out. The link will be down below. Make sure you get your tickets and all that stuff. Unless you want to be a Patreon member, High Priest level, then you automatically have tickets. And you can always access any other workshop that I've done. That's one of the reasons why I love the High Priest level. You get to go back and watch any other workshop that I've done before because they're only available for Patreon members. So there you go. So the one that I basically do bibliomancy when I'm picking out which story we're gonna do. So I'll ask spirit and then I'll go like this, and then I'll just let the page fall open, and the first place I look is the story that we're doing. So that's how I pick the story. And the one that came up for us today is from the Narratives of Yemoja, which is story number one, Yemoja and the ORI ritual. Okay, so we are going to be reading this story, and then we will break it down because you guys know this is kind of like a class format when it comes to Orisha story time. We kind of focus in on the studying aspect and the educational aspect. So we're like breaking it down and really taking apart the concepts, really looking at it, having a conversation in the comments. So definitely make sure that you put your thoughts down below. So we're gonna get started with the story. Whew. A long time ago now. When Olodumare created the earth, he divided several of his powers among the Orishas and gave each one a domain of his own. Many of the powers that were given to the Orishas belonged to the forces of nature, but others belonged to more specific aspects of human life on earth. When it was Yemoja's turn to receive her power, Olodumare gave her the power and knowledge over all domestic chores in the abode of the Orisha, as well as the upbringing of his children. Yemoja worked day and night, always complaining about having been given a less favorable share of power. Quote, I find it unfair that the other Orishas receive sacrifices and are constantly praised for their attributes, and all I get is work and more work, unquote. As time passed, Yemoja's complaints grew more intense, and they tormented Orisanla's head so much that eventually he fell ill. Then Yemoja realized that she was the cause of Orisanla's illness, so she decided to nurse him back to health. She went out and gathered several natural elements: spring water, koala nuts, plant oils, ifa trees, white pigeons, and delicious sweet fruits. When she returned to Orisanla's abode, she began treating his head using the natural elements, and in just a few days, Orisanla was completely cured. Grateful for what Yemoja did to save his life, Orisanla spoke to Olodumare. Great Olodumare, I come to ask you a favor. Olodumare said, What can I do for you? Orisala said. I would like if you were to give Yemoja the power to take care of all heads, Olodumare said. Why are you asking me this now? Orisala said, because I recently learned that she is very good in doing this. She saved my life by taking good care of my head. Olodumare understood Orisala's request and granted Yemoja power over heads of men. Since then, she began receiving sacrifices and praises. She was called upon to preside over preparations of the ORI ritual of the making of the heads. Okay? So, lots to take in from there. Especially when it comes to, I feel like the fact that this was the story that, you know, we got through bibliomancy is significant because it's Gemini season. Okay, so it's a very mental season. It's a season of the mind. It's a season of communication. It's a season of consciousness. So it's interesting to me how this is the story that we got, all about the mind, the Ori. So it's interesting to me that this is the story that they wanted me to do. And I was very much pushed into doing this specific Orisha story time today. Like I got the message earlier in the day, like, oh, you need to do one of the stories. I was like, okay. So it's interesting to me that this is the one that they want us to talk about. But I think it's interesting how there's an elevation of power and dissatisfaction when it comes to Yemoja in the way that the story plays out, because we start off with her wanting more for herself and her having to kind of not just like be herself, but especially analyze the situation, which is literally parts of the way your mind works. She had to figure out what was causing the pain, what was making him ill, and like what was the problem, right? So there was a huge part of this was using your head, using your mind about this, and why it needs to be done the way it needs to be done. And so there was a dissatisfaction that she had with her own gifts, and she wanted that elevation. She wanted to be elevated differently. She wanted to be addressed differently as well, and instead of just working. And it's ironic because as far as Yemoja today, as far as like, yes, embodying an aspect of nature, through colonization and the transatlantic slave trade, Yemoja has taken different roles, because while Yemoja it's connected to a specific river in Nigeria, through the diaspora coming to the island specifically, she took on a different role as the ocean, and so she shares that with Olokun, but and we'll talk about that in another day. But she took on a different role through like that, again, what was kind of needed, that elevation within the moment of what was needed. And because obviously the Orishas are a personified force of nature, so they are connected to elements of nature, as many indigenous cultures, spiritual practices are. They're very much embodiments of nature. And so Yemoja ended up taking, today in the diaspora, especially in the Caribbean, and the way people perceive her today, she is more connected to the sea than with anything. But that's not the case in Nigeria. It's not the original way. That's actually the diasporic way of looking at her and how she has elevated throughout time as well. So there is this kind of like focus of like, okay, I'm just working, but I don't feel appreciated. It's very much that mom energy, that nourishing energy that she's very much known for. And the like just giving, very Cancer energy. Tell me it's not giving Cancer energy. Very like nourishing, very like, I'm just working, I'm just doing everything, but I don't feel appreciated. Like, it's literally giving Cancer vibes. Y'all. And so there's a focus on her wanting to elevate herself, wanting more for herself, wanting more for her life, and wanting to feel that appreciation, which is totally valid. And so she takes on a different role by tapping into the mind, because she realizes, okay, there's something wrong. I'm causing the problem. How do I fix the problem? Now, this is also interesting because a lot of the time, and also this is a great conversation for Mercury retrograde, because y'all, a lot of the time, when it comes to Mercury retrograde, we always feel like, okay, we need to distance ourselves from people. We need to let go. We need to do this. We need to do that. And sometimes it's like, really, like, no, we have to analyze the thing, and you have to accept that in a certain situation, like if you were the problem, you now need to correct that. You now, like, let's say you need to apologize for someone and it's been long overdue. Let's say there's like unfinished business there, like you needed to it needed to get addressed in that way. It's kind of like that, like with that moment where Yemoja's like, oh, I realized I am the problem. I need to fix this. I gotta heal this. I gotta heal them. And so it changes the approach of, you know what, I'm the problem. I need to leave. I need to put distance, instead of, oh, I actually need to nourish the situation. I need to fix this. So it's interesting with the perspective that is taken on this, and how, because of the choices that were made in that situation, there was a different outcome, and she ended up getting what she wanted. She got elevated in the way that she wanted to. And so it's interesting how it went from it's like a transmuting negativity into having to heal something, into the thing that getting what she wanted, because she actually went through that process. And it's funny to me because, again, this is something that happens a lot during Mercury retrograde. It's a lot of different conversations. There's a lot of things that happen and pop up during this time. And it's something that I feel like it's really important to take note of, because you should be aware of how you want to react in certain situations. And you should be picking picking your choices carefully as far as your reaction goes. Instead of being super impulsive about certain things, there is a moment where, if you bear responsibility for something, you should analyze what way you want to address that, okay? Responsibly. You should honor that, and you should sit down with yourself and have that conversation, instead of like just dismissing it and calling it a day, and just like saying, brushing it off or whatnot, or being like, you know what, I guess I'm the problem. Let me just, no, you know what, I guess they just didn't like me. Let me just leave. And just kind of like, instead of seeing it as, like distancing, actually seeing, oh wait, can I correct this issue? Was this on my part? And if it was on my part, how do I make it right? And sometimes it really just takes that. Sometimes it really just takes, that kind of holding yourself to the mirror and really saying, okay, what do I want to do about the situation? Because she didn't go into, healing him for her own benefit. She went into healing him because it's like, oh, I caused this. It was a sense of responsibility. And because of that taking of responsibility, she ended up getting what she wanted. So it's a part of why I love looking at these stories, is because they teach you so much about perception, discernment, and how to process certain things. And I think this is something that is really, really, really important to look at when it comes to the mind, because we are talking about the ORI, we're talking about the head, and we're talking about how she had to elevate herself into a bigger role because of her discernment, okay? And what role she plays in that nourishment that she is always doing. She's always like working and giving, which is very much that mother energy, right? And so that can be very draining. So when you feeling that need to feel appreciated, that need to feel, and wanting that, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But there's also the way that we approach certain things needs to be like address. Like if you're just just reacting to something and just feeling bitter and hurtful and like just like holding it in and making situations like uncomfortable and toxic, instead of just having a conversation with someone like, hey, I've been feeling like this and I don't like it. Like instead of just having that one-on-one, it tells you a lot about the way that you're creating and just harboring that energy inside of you. And so it's so important to kind of be able to have, again, that's discernment and say, okay, you know what, I realize that I've been making this worse and I need to correct this. How do I correct this? Let me see if I can correct this. And how do I do that? How do I make this better? And sometimes, again, we're not perfect. We're human beings, and sometimes we are the problem. Okay, so if we're the problem, how do you solve it? How do you make things right? How are you fair in situations? How do you decenter yourself? How do you hold your ego accountable? Okay, especially when you're looking at it towards the lens of, oh, I deserve better. Okay, if you deserve better, why aren't you acting better? Why aren't you being better? Why aren't you putting yourself in that level where you're like, you know, I actually do deserve this, instead of just, again, compressing that energy inside and just building it up into this thing, right? So I think the story is super, super important. I feel like it really, you know, speaks to a lot, especially during this time. So I really love that this is the story that Spirit chose to, you know, that they wanted me to read for you guys today. Because again, I did this through Bibliomancy. So I just wanted to know which story they wanted me to talk about today, and that was the one. This story, by the way, is on page 220. So yeah, the book will be linked down below, and we will do more Orisha story time as we are in the channel. You guys will get more stories. So yeah, I hope that you guys like the story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I thought that this one was really, really, really good. So thank y'all so much for being here with me, for holding space with me. We will do more of these stories, I promise. Definitely don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to check out the Patreon down below. And I will see you in the next video. I love you guys so much.